Okay, so we've got the cam seals all done, and I'm going to move on to the water pump now because it's kind of next in line, going from the top to the bottom. Again, you can do these in any particular order that you want, but that's just the order I've chosen to do it. Before I do the water pump though, I will need to get underneath the car and make sure I drain the radiator so that we don't have coolant spilling all over the place. To drain the radiator, we just have to use the drain spout that's on the bottom. It's actually exactly in the middle of the car, and it's pretty easy to find. It'll usually have a white spindle on it that you can just turn and then put a bucket underneath, collect the old coolant out of the engine, and then probably it's always a good idea to make sure that you dispose of it properly. Don't do something like pour it into the street or something like that, because it tastes sweet and animals like to drink it and it's really poisonous to them. So just put it in a bucket and then put it in an old jug or something like that and take it to your chemical depot. So just turn the knob to the left. The coolant will drain. If you pop the cap off the top, it'll come out. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to drain the coolant out of the block. This is quite a bit trickier than just draining the radiator. You know, if you just want to replace the coolant in your radiator, you know, that takes care of a good portion of it. But to really get all of it, you have to drain the stuff out of the block as well. So I'll just show you what I've done to do that. You'll notice that I've just unbolted and pulled the exhaust heat shield back a little bit to give myself some space. And I've also pulled off the radiator side of the upper rad hose, just so that I have some more place to work. And you can see I've got a wrench with 2 extensions on it, and the drain plug for the block coolant is just down in behind there. You can see my 17mm socket on it. The bolt head of that plug is quite long, so it's kind of easy to identify. You can kind of see where it is, just kind of right underneath and down a little bit from where the exhaust manifold mounts to the head. And that plug is basically in the bottom or in the lower section of the water jacket. So if we pull it out, and you just kind of have to guess where it's going to drain at the bottom, so use a big drain pan below. So I'm going to pull it out and drain the fluid from the block. Okay, the last remaining bit of coolant, if you really want to get it all, it will be in the reservoir. So what I've done to get that out is, you can see I've disconnected the reservoir hose from where the radiator cap goes, and then I've just looped it out of its stays and fed it down through to the bottom of the car and into my catch bucket. And when you do that, take the lid off the top of the reservoir fill neck, and a lot of it will drain out, just siphon out of there. And then you can also just apply some air pressure from an air compressor or something like that, and you'll force the rest of it out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flush the radiator out with some clean water. So I've reopened the spout in the bottom of the radiator, put my catch bucket down there, and I've filled some jugs with clean water. You could use a garden hose if that's easier, but I don't have a hose long enough to get to my garage, so I just use jugs. And the idea is just to run water through the radiator until you see it running clear out the bottom. That's just to get all the sediment and stuff that's clinging to the sides of the radiator walls. So the fluid is running clear now, and so now I'm going to close the radiator spout in the bottom. I'm going to rethread the reservoir hose back up and reconnect it. I'm going to replace the block coolant plug and put my exhaust heat shield back on and put the upper rad hose back on. And then the system is ready for new coolant to be added. With the coolant all drained out, we're ready to remove the water pump now from the side of the engine. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to get my wrenches and my socket drivers in here, and you can see there's a number of bolts that hold the water pump in place. So working from above and below, I'm going to take those bolts out and then pull the water pump out. Okay, in the bottom part of your screen you should be able to see the area where the water pump fits in the water line, and so I've removed the water pump. It takes just those 5 bolts and it comes right off. You might have to wiggle it just a little bit if the gasket is stuck a little bit. I'll just show you what they kind of look like. Here's the one that I took out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get in there with rags, and I'm going to clean the area just to get rid of any dirt and things like that might have gotten kind of in the gasket surface and any oil. I'm also going to take some acetone, so and use a rag, and the reason to do that is to just get any residue from the rubber gasket, or if the person who put the water pump on before had put some gasket maker or some Permatex on it, just to make sure that I get all of that off. So acetone will help to remove all that just around where the gasket seats, and then I'll be ready to put the new one on. Okay, so I've got the water pump area all cleaned up. Took the acetone and cleaned off any remainders from the old O-ring, and everything's kind of cleaned up in the area down there. So here is the new water pump. This is from Honda again. Like I said, I try to use Honda genuine parts whenever I can because they always fit properly and they're excellent quality. You'll notice that it has come without an O-ring installed already. Honda ships that in the same box, but they want you to insert it. So this is the water pump and the O-ring come together, and the part number that I'm using, 19210 PK2 305. So that's the pump and the O-ring from Honda. Now, I could just seat the O-ring into the pump right now and everything would probably be fine, no problems. But just to make sure that I'm not going to have any leaks, I'm going to use this RTV gasket from Permatex for water pumps and thermostats. I'm going to take it, I'm just going to make a bead of it in the slot for the O-ring. Then I'm going to set the O-ring, and then I may put a little bit on top as well, and some just around these bolt holes. After I'm done that, I'm going to then gently take it from the underside and put it back into where it goes on the engine. And I'm going to finger tighten only, just finger tight, each one of the 5 bolts. And the reason to do the finger tightening is to try to get the O-ring and the pump to seat evenly. As I tighten it, I'm going to tighten each bolt just a quarter of a turn at a time. I'm not going to do one all the way tight to 9 foot-pounds. I'm going to do each one just a quarter turn until they're all the right tightness, and that'll ensure that the pump goes on smoothly and straight. So this Permatex product, there's lots of other brands that make similar things, but this is the one that I'm going to use. It's inexpensive, and a thin bead around the groove for the O-ring will help to make sure that we can get a good seat. Doesn't take much. As I said, I was also going to put some around the bolt holes. I'm going to line up the O-ring, and without getting anything all gooed up, I'm going to just seat it into its groove. And you can kind of just run your finger along to make sure that it's seated, and you'll also form just a layer of that RTV gasket. And now it's ready to be put on. So I'm going to do that, and as I said, finger tight the bolts and then quarter turn them to tight, each one in sequence. The torque for the water pump bolts is 9 foot-pounds.